everyone. Hi everyone, I am Karina Kantas, host of Behind the Pen. Thank you for joining me for the show. Today I'm talking to author Victoria Saccenti. Welcome, Victoria.
Hi, welcome. Thank you.
Whereabouts are you in this world?
I'm in Central Florida at the time. We just had Hurricane Dorian skip us, which was kind of nice.
That's good.
Yes. It stood out off the coast threatening for close to 10 days, but finally it moved up north and we escaped a big bullet.
So, has there been a lot of damage to the people that have actually not escaped it? Because I haven't heard news or anything.
Yes. The Bahamas have suffered greatly.
Oh dear.
They've gone through a lot. So they're going to need a lot of help from the world.
Well, let's hope people put their hand in their pocket and are charitable to a cause like this. Okay, so let's talk about Victoria Saccenti. Who are you? Where are you from? Give me some background.
Victoria Saccenti. I was born in Cuba, and after the takeover from the communist takeover by the Castros and the Che Guevara people, my family kind of split. My mother picked up my sister and I, and she took us out of Cuba, escaping the regime, and we became sort of globetrotters since then. We lived in several places. We lived in Mexico for 1 year, then we lived in Florida for about 3. We moved to Puerto Rico. We lived there for about 4 years. Then I went on my own. Then I moved to New York. And the traveling didn't stop there. After 7 years of living in New York, I was hired by Pan American World Airways because I spoke 2 languages. And I continued flying the world since then.
So
up until when
you were an air stewardess.
I'm a flight attendant.
Flight attendant. How many years did you do that?
Flight attendant. According to us, we have a standard joke that says that we are federally mandated escape assistants.
Scary.
So that's who we were, who I was, so
How long did you do that for?
Did that for about 30 years.
3 years. There's a lot of training before you actually got on the plane.
30
years. Oh my God.
30.
Wow.
Yes, 30 years. I did get to see the world, believe it or not. Yes.
Wow.
So I gained a lot of experience from that. It was very nice, actually.
Can you work your way up in a job like that? Can you go like up to head flight attendant or whatever?
You can. In the world of in Pan American's world, before Pan American went under, you started out as a flight attendant, and then you went into training, additional training, and then you became a purser. And then once you became a purser, that you were in charge of the crew and everything, all the workings inside the aircraft, then you could move up to the level of supervisor. And then once you became a supervisor, you moved up the ranks through the non-traditional system. In other words, you were no longer part of a crew, but you were part of the company. So that's how it went.
And what about you after 30 years? Where were you before you left?
I didn't want to become a supervisor. That was not where the fun was.
You wanted to be part of the crew.
I wanted to be a crew member. That's where the fun was. That you got to fly, you got to do a lot of fun stuff, you got to see a lot. Yeah. And we were very good to each other, because once you left home, then your crew was your family for the period of time that the flight was going on. So you were, let's say you were gone for 2, 5, 7, 10 days. That was your family. So the ties, the bonds we made in those years were were a lot of fun. They were
Amazing.
very nice, and they're still there till today. So
You still keep
we're
in
still
touch
in
with them.
touch. We're still in touch.
That's
Yes.
fabulous. So,
Yeah.
so tell me, when did the idea of wanting to take your writing seriously begin? When did you decide that you could become a writer?
Well, first of all, I always liked reading. My family was always big in the arts and in reading books. That was their thing. I did not grow up with a television set. Instead of our entertainment became books. And so my mother planted a whole series of books in my hands and said, this is what you're going to be doing on your free time. So that started, kind of sparked the imagination a little bit. And so I started writing little plays and little fairy tales. And some of them I would play them with my sister and my cousins, and some I would not. And those kind of fell by the wayside when we left Cuba. Because then my attention was focused on something else, which was survival in a world that we didn't know. Then later on in time, once I started flying, I began writing my mom all these letters and telling her stories about the countries that I visited, especially if there was some stories, some myths, facts, histories, Prince so-and-so lived here, and imagine if this would have happened back then. So that kind of sparked the imagination again back into what I had dropped off years before. Then one time I became very involved in the internet with several book clubs, and I became a moderator for the Outlander Book Club.
Okay.
And so my job was to read comments and posts and make sure that they were appropriate, that everybody played fair, and everybody was nice to one another.
Yeah.
Let's be polite. Let's not get nasty. We're all entitled to our own ideas and our own views and things like that. And through that process, a friend of mine started to say, you could write a book, because I was talking to her about some other ideas that I had. She said, you could write a book. And I said, yeah, well, no, hem and haw. Then one day, coming back home from work, I had this vision from the main character in my very, very first book. And he just it's a miracle I didn't get into a car accident, because it happened at 2:00 in the morning. And I've always said that writers have to have a little bit of schizophrenia, because how else do you see your characters,
Right? I totally agree with that. We are loons.
Right? You know what I'm talking about. So he insisted. He said, what about me? Aren't you going to write about me? And that's kind of how it all started.
So your first novel, the whole series is called Destiny's Saga, and your first novel is Destiny's Plan. Where did this initial idea come from for the first novel?
Part of the idea was inspired by the military men that I saw on the flights. Because I was flying during the time of the first Gulf War, and then after that, I saw the men and women that went to Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I would see them on my flights, and I always wondered, what were their lives like? What were their loves? What were their passions? What made them tick? What was their background? Especially the ones that went to serve on a volunteer basis. And I think somewhere along the line, like I was saying, when I was driving home that night, I had the vision of this young man, this military youth, if you will, because he's young when Destiny's Plan begins, who said to me, "Why aren't you not going to write about me?" And so I had to take time to digest the story for a moment and say, but where, why, who are you, you know? And
Yeah.
so I opened myself up to the conversation with the character, and he was basically saying, I'm not part of the new era. I'm part of the era when we didn't have a chance to say no, when we were drafted, when we had to go to war, to Vietnam especially. And that's when,
That's why you picked that era for the
right,
Vietnam War.
that's how it all started. And of course, back then, transportation was not what it's like today. Back then, a lot of them were being transported via buses and military transport, or they would take like Greyhound and Trailways and, you know,
They'd
that
have to
type
make
of
their own way basically to the barracks or where they were
correct.
training. Yeah.
They received orders, yes, they got their orders, and they had to make their way over to, especially to the training camps. So the training bases. And so that's kind of sort of how it began, him traveling to Fort Benning, which is where he received orders to go. And because he wanted to become Green Beret, and in order to become a Green Beret, first you had to have flight school, and you had to learn how to jump and be a parachuter. So that opened up the story to for me in terms of visualizing, what if he meets someone on the way over, someone who is significant, a chance meeting. And that's how destiny came into play, because he was destined to meet this young lady and she was destined to meet him. But what they didn't count on was everything else that happens afterwards, you know, how life interferes and all the events that happen afterwards.
It sounds like he was 100% wanting to sign up and to serve his country, and then when he meets this one lady, young lady on the bus, everything changes. Why? What happens on that bus in those few hours to make him and her, because she's just so pure and innocent? What happens in those hours to make their life change?
It's an interesting thing. I believe that some people don't think love at first sight is real, but the circumstances of her meeting, the circumstances of her life, she was not escaping, but she was being forced to leave a parent behind that she adored, and she was in a bad situation when she gets to meet him. He is going to serve the country willingly because he comes from a family of service people who served. The men in his family all served. His father was a veteran for the Second World War. So for him, it was a very normal thing to do. That was his duty, and he was going to fulfill his duty. He was not going to be part of the resistance. He had accepted his fate, and he decided, if I'm going to do this, I might as well just do it and do it the right way.
Yeah.
But in that moment, when both of them are together, he has the opportunity to see what's happening around this young lady, how she's being treated. And so the protective side in him rises to the surface.
Right.
That's kind of how it all begins to churn, if you will. She receives a sense of protection from him, of shelter from him, while his best instincts and best feelings are elicited by her. So it's the perfect magic, you know.
Yeah, but he must be in such a a mess, because he's torn now. Does he protect her, or does he follow and do his duty? How can he protect her if he goes off to war and fights for his country? I mean, he
Well,
must
that's one of the
be so torn.
that's one of the big conflicts at the beginning of the book, because he could. I mean, a lot of young men were escaping. There were many of them were going to Canada. Many of them were going somewhere else. They were trying to get an exemption. In his case, he couldn't. That opportunity had left him. He no longer had that chance.
Yeah, especially
So
with
his
his family.
only other opportunity would say, I'm going to take her and I'm going to escape this country. But then what happens? If you start out your life on the wrong side of the road, so to speak,
Yeah.
then what does that do for your future? I
Yeah.
mean, and that's something that he had enough maturity and enough forethought to say, if I begin my life with this person whom I feel that I could love deeply, then what kind of a future do we have if I cannot be true to myself? If I don't, and the only thing you can say is, hopefully we will get over this. This is a challenge, and we will overcome the challenge. You know, I'll go and I'll come back in one piece. We hope.
Well, yeah.
So,
I mean, let's miss out the middle and the end of the book. I mean, people they need to read the book to find out what happens between these two young lovers. I know there's a lot of conflict in between, with the family, with the war. Amazing book that people do need to read. Let's just go on to the second one. Why was there a sequel?
Halfway through writing the first book, the young lady of the female lead of the first book has a younger sister, and through the process of writing the first book, the younger sister said, "I'm next.
I'm
You
next
have
to
to
tell my story."
now. You have once you finish with this, I'm next." And quite frankly, because when I started the first book, I was just going to be one book and that was going to be it. I was not going to continue this. I had the storyline was in my mind, in my heart. I had the outline. This is how it's going to be, because I'm not really a complete plotter. I'm a plotter and a pantser, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I knew where it was going to go, what was going to happen.
Exactly.
I already knew it.
You had
Yes,
the ribbon ready to wrap up,
right.
and be done with, and then
Exactly.
she came along and said,
So,
hello.
so I had it in my mind that this is how it was going to end. And then here I am writing a scene in the first book, midway, and then she says, well, you're going to write about me. And then there's another character, and he said, well, you're going to write about me. And so that's how the second developed.
You put the two together.
The second, they had been thrown together as well.
Already in the first book.
Again, it's that one journey that I always say, you just never know how one life affects another, and that other life that gets affected will affect the next one that follows.
Yeah, there's a word for that, and I can't remember what it's called.
Which one?
Where you're all connected somehow, but you're not. There's a word for it. I can't think. Something circle. Anyway.
Well, it is a circle of sorts, but in the way I saw it, it was more of a linear event, in the sense that one affects the next, and then the next affects the next, and then the next one touches the next. And so whether you like it or not, whether you think that your life is meaningless, in the sense, not meaningless, because I don't believe life is meaningless, but I mean, if you think your life is nothing big, not somewhat average, that nothing big really happens, that you haven't discovered the cure for cancer, you haven't discovered interstellar travel, you know, where you can put people in cryogenic tubes and send them to the far reaches of the universe, whatever, blah, 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 blah. The point being is that every human touches another human.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, some way, you have to remember that your influence
Could influence
it
something.
will affect the
Mm-hmm.
people around you. And in turn, that will expand outside of the scope of your life.
So we've got those two meeting for the first time in book one, and then book two, you take over their story. Without giving too much away, of course, what is different about these two relationship between the sister and this other guy than the first book with Matthew and Raquelita?
With Matthew and Raquelita, there were their conflicts and the difficulties were more external than internal.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, there's no doubt of how they feel about each other, but it's everything else that's happening outside of them that buffets them,
that stops them
in
from
this direction or in that direction. And the period in time in 1967, 1968, the United States was in a huge turmoil, politically, culturally.
like it's not now.
It's almost like we're 50 years later, 51 years later, we're back again on that same, on that same space. But that's what was happening back then. So they, to a point, the couple to a point are being torn by the events around them.
Mm-hmm.
Had they lived in a normal life with everything being perfect and whatever, they would have met, fallen in love, kissed, made up, kissed, fought, made up, married, had children. That was the end of it. That's not what it is, because that's not real life. So in the case of the second book, now you have a slightly different situation. The conflicts are internal. In addition to having external, but the conflicts are more internal. It's a matter of relationships and how you can be confused, how you need to grow up, how you think your heart can be torn by two different individuals. And so the struggle really between, in the next book, it's more of a triangle than anything else.
I was going to ask if there's a triangle when you said about
there is a triangle.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the resolution of that triangle that happens in the third book.
So we have the end book, which is Destiny's Way. Which sister or which characters are starring in this book?
In Destiny's Way?
Yeah.
The last one? The first one, the second one, Destiny's Choice, is Maria Teresa, Marité, because I haven't said yet that, and I guess it's hats off to my culture. The family of the ladies, they are all Spanish descent. So they're first generation Americans, but their parents are from Spain.
Okay.
So that's why the names. In the second book, the Destiny's Choice, Marité has to grow up. It's more of it's a little bit of a coming of age, if you will. Mm-hmm. And coming to terms with who you are, growing up, mm-hmm. maturing, making right decisions, you know. And then as well, some of the characters, especially one, he's got his own issues because he's a Vietnam vet. And he returns to the United States with a great deal of trauma from the war. And back then, in the early 70s, what we know today as PTSD was unknown. People did not know. They didn't even have a name for it. And that's one of the things that the book explores, is how a wounded veteran comes home and how he adapts to the life around him and to his
When
own
there's no
emotions.
treatment, yeah, if there's no treatment,
Right.
he's got to look after.
To his, and especially to his emotions, to accepting that he can handle this. How can is he deserving of love, if you will? So that's then eventually the resolution happens in the third book, but the third book actually comes to turn, takes the whole story, the complete arc of the family. So the characters that you saw in the first book, even though the first book is resolved, you could just read the first book and drop it right there.
Yeah.
By the time that you get to the third book, you will see family members, parents, cousins, people that showed up and had cameo roles in the first book, so to speak. You see a complete resolution of everyone. You see how the arc completes.
But what is
book.
the actual plot for Destiny's Way? What is the story?
The Destiny's Way is when Brian, well, I'm trying not to say too much of the second book, but in the second book there is a breakup. There is a big, there is a schism between, if you will, between Maria Teresa, Brian, and Michael. Mm-hmm. There's a huge, where the family is almost torn apart because of it.
Right.
And the storyline of the third book is how those wounds are mended.
Okay, the conclusion.
The conclusion of certain events that happened, that began in the second book, are revealed, and so certain question marks are revealed in the third book. Right. You learn what drives Maria Teresa, and you learn what drives Brian, and how the people that how one person can take the wrong turn and almost ruin himself in life, and given the right opportunity, because there are some pretty intense moments in the book, and so given the right opportunity and the right development, that person can be steered back to the right course. And how even when you don't think you will have a happy resolution, you end up having one when you least expect it.
I have to ask, as an author myself, you do write about what you know, not just because you're taking the ladies from Spanish descent, which is easier for you because of your background.
Yes.
Have you put your own experiences, don't have to say what they are, but have you put your own experiences into that saga?
Well, what I put in the saga was what I know of the difficulty of being from another culture growing in the United States. Arriving to a country where the language is different, the customs are different, where even your own family has to adapt, the difficulty of the family to adapt what the norms, what they grew up with, and having to adapt to a completely different set of values. I mean, it was a huge culture shock when we came here.
But you'd been traveling, you'd been Mexico, you'd been where I can't remember the other places. You'd been to so many different places. Surely that was a culture shock and adjustment of every different country that you lived in, or was America just really different?
Well, Mexico was the first, but we spoke the same language, so that made a difference. That helped some. It wasn't easy, but that helped some. Because some people think that just because we all speak Spanish, we're all the same. We're not. You know, the people from Argentina and the people from Chile are as different as the people from the United Kingdom and the people from Australia.
Yeah.
And so it goes. They speak the same language, but that's as far as it goes. Everything else is different because you have a different reality in each country. So yes, there are influences, you know, and there are similar ties that take you back to the original country. But as time goes on in the new world, you develop your own. And so that's how it is in South America and Latin America. So for us to go into Mexico, even though we spoke the same language, it was night and day.
Yeah.
But the big deal came when we came to the United States.
It really
because
shock.
that changed, the language changed. And so not only was it cultural, but it was also a matter of communication. Now, when you're young, you're a sponge. You accept, you adapt to the language very quickly. But still, there is still that adaptation process, you know. And especially, like I said, when it comes to, like, for instance, for my mother, raising two young daughters, that's where I drew especially for the beginning of Destiny's Plan, for Destiny's Plan itself. For my mother to raise two young daughters in a country that had completely different set of values and you know, what they allowed, what they didn't allow, you know, all those things made a huge difference and made it. So I drew on that conflict so that I could try to be as realistic, especially when it came to Raquelita, who was the oldest. And she meets up with someone who is a young man, who's an American, who is a soldier. And it's like, wait a minute.
Did you put yourself into Raquelita's shoes? Did you?
I tried.
You know, try to experience what her emotions would have been like if it was you going through that yourself.
I did, and I try to stay. I usually, when I'm writing, I try to stay very open to my characters. So that's why sometimes I go through periods where I cannot write at all, because if they're not talking, I can't. So in the case of Raquelita, yes, I did. She brought me in other words. She said to me, feel this. Do you feel this? Do you see me? Do you know what I'm going through? There were a couple of times when I was sobbing through some of it. So yes, because I could feel her sense of despair, her confusion, or whatever was troubling her at the time.
This is what readers don't understand, the mentality that what we go through as writers. We don't just have, like you said, the schizophrenia side of having characters talk to us and not let us sleep until we get that scene written down on paper.
Right.
See, some dark scenes, if we have to write a dark scene, it takes us to a dark place, and we have to climb out of that dark place to get back into our reality. And readers don't really understand. They read a book and we take them to another place and they get caught up in the story, but they don't understand what we as writers go through to get that down on paper, for them to be able to live that even for a moment.
The case in point of that, what you're saying, which is absolutely right on point, you know, very, very, very true. There's a scene in the first book, in Destiny's Plan. I wrote it. I wrote the scene. It was the most difficult scene I've ever written in my life. I remember giving it to a friend of mine, and she said, "It is so chillingly real." Said, it was so chilling, so real, so intense. I was walking around the house for several moments afterwards, just completely thrown out, you know, by this thing. Well, as it turned out, I never put it in the book.
You didn't? Why not?
I ended not. Maybe one day I may return it, but it's a kind of book that it's kind of scene that a lot of people can handle. So even though I saw it and I lived it, and it took me like a week to get out of the depression, you know, afterwards, I said, you know what, I'm not going to put it down.
It just didn't,
because
in your story.
It's in the end, I hinted at it, And I
That was
kind of, if you're an immersive reader like I am, you kind of know what's happened,
yeah.
but I did not
Go into
smash your face into it. So
but
I
it's
didn't.
there if you ever wanted to again. Talking about going darker, your latest novel, Naomi's Journey, which just won an award, silver medal for Reader's Favourite Best Romance. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, you should be. That takes, I mean, we're going straight off from Vietnam, straight down now to North Carolina and racism and abuse, and we're really going into dark areas in this book. The reviews you've been given so far are absolutely amazing. People have loved the book. They've been able to immerse themselves into that era which they never experienced themselves, because you were able to do that in your writing. Again, this must have been difficult for you for some of the scenes. It must have been hard to write, and hard to then to get out of your head. So I can imagine there were some times of just walking away before you get back to the book.
You know, with Naomi's Journey, something very peculiar happened. With the Destiny series, I loved all the characters. I loved them dearly. I mean, it's like they were part of my soul.
Yeah, family.
But when the story finished, I said, okay, it's done. It's finished. But when I finished Naomi's Journey, it took me a while to let them go. I just felt I was so close to them, so attached to Noemi and Richard, that when the time came to write down the end, I felt like something was missing inside of me. And somebody said, a fellow writer, in fact, said, well, then follow them, you know, continue with them. And I said, I can't, because it's ridiculous. I said, no, then I'm forcing the issue. And
exactly. You're the author. You know when it's ended, it's finished. Yes. You know when their story is happy ending or sad ending, whatever the ending, it's up to you, and you know when it's the right time. Forcing it, like I shall not name any best-selling author names that should have stopped writing years ago and doing a series that went on forever, which didn't need to go on forever, and just basically force the issue because they were getting paid for these books to be written. And so they were just writing crap, simple as that. They were writing for the sake of it, and that shouldn't happen. And as, like I said, as an author, you know when it's time to stop. And with Naomi's Journey, it's a solo book. It was written as a solo book, and it's going to end as a solo book. And I think I love Destiny Saga. It's amazing. The story is amazing. But there is something special, something magical about Naomi's Journey. Something happened when you wrote that book.
It was did. It's the only thing I can say. It did, and I don't have words to explain it. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, it feels like it from reading the book, from reading the reviews, from the awards that you've already been given for it, and I'm sure you'll get more. It's an amazing book, and it tells the story of is it, do you say Creole?
Creole.
She's Louisiana
Creole.
Who,
a beautiful Louisiana Creole lady, yes,
that lives in North Carolina in the late 60s, where, of course, there's still racism. There's so much turbulence going on with riots and bootlegging and what have you that went on at that era, which is still going on. She lives in such a difficult situation already, even though she's a survivor. You know she's a survivor, and you know that even though she accepts her life, she accepts it when nobody in that situation should ever accept, but she does, and she gets on with it. And then we meet Richard.
Well, you know, it's funny because somebody that read the book said that I titled it Noemi's Journey. But this person, when she wrote the review, she said it's Noemi's journey, but it's also Richard's journey. It's not just hers, it's his as well. So because he lands in this place, has no idea what he's in for, you know, and it's like, boom, there you are, and all of this stuff is happening around him. So, and there's a lot that he has to overcome. There's a lot he has to fight against, and there's a lot he has to understand, because part of it is a big education for him. That's the big contrast between the two of them, in the sense that she knows what's going on.
And he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand why it's happening to her, why people are treating her like they do. He wants to protect her, but then again, he's in, like you say, he's in a situation where he can only do so much without getting her into more trouble, and of course getting himself into his own trouble with a motorcycle club. Now, why did you bring a motorcycle club into this book?
Well, because Richard is a motorcycle rider. He loves his motorcycles. That's basically it. And he did belong to a motorcycle club when he lived upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
So when he came down, when he was leaving New York because of some stuff that he needed to get away from, he wanted to start a new life. That's what I mean. He landed on this place. He said, "Oh, it's so pretty here." He has no idea what he's getting into. It's pretty on the outside, but once you look on the inside, it's like, oh my God, you know, this is as ugly as it gets.
Ugly as it gets, yeah.
So be careful. Don't judge the outside. You know, take just some time to see what's really going on, which is really what happens to him. But because his motorcycle is a beautiful shovel head model. The local club, the local motorcycle club, they have their desires. They want to get their hooks into that beautiful machine. And so they figure that there's one way is to bring him into the club. And that's kind of sort of how it all develops. Plus his boss used to be part of the motorcycle club. So they're still hanging out where he's going to work. So whether he likes it or not, he's surrounded, even though he's
surrounded by them, even though he doesn't want to be part of them.
Right. Even though he doesn't want to be part of anything, he has no choice.
Yeah.
You know, and that's he's basically they surround him in this environment, and he does the best he can, but it's almost inescapable.
I love that there are two separate stories in Naomi's journey. As the reviewer said, you've got Richard's journey, you've got Naomi's journey, and the two, when they get together, when they meet, they clash in such a explosive way that they just they can't believe it themselves. They don't understand what's happening. And as well as all the crap that she's going through and all the crap that he's going through, you then have those two, destiny, let's say destiny again, who's thrown them together.
I guess it's a big deal with me. It's one of those. I guess it's all those years of reading Greek mythology. You know, it's like destiny. You know, the gods are in charge. You know, it's maybe that's part
I
of it.
mean, I will tell you a tale. I mean, I totally agree with destiny and fate. I was with my first boyfriend for 4 years, and we had a trip booked to the Bahamas, and we broke up. And because I paid a deposit for the holiday, I made sure he paid it back. So with that money that I got back, I took me and my sister to Greece on holiday. It was for her birthday. And it was the first time we'd flown and the first time we'd been abroad. And I met my husband. And so that's destiny. That is fate. If all of that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be where I am now with 2 amazing daughters and a fantastic husband and an amazing life. And so I love destiny. I love fate. I love reading about it. I love people's fiction, but I love hearing the real stories as well. But yes, I totally believe in it.
But you were also open to it. Do you know how many people out there, they are not open to it? The opportunity comes and they don't want to accept it. They refuse. They shut themselves up and they refuse to accept anything that's coming that way. It's kind of like that joke. I don't know if I've ever told you the joke. It's the guy, this man there's a hurricane coming, and the weather channel is telling him there's going to be a flood, there's going to be wind, you're going to lose your house. So somebody comes by as the water begins to rise from the storm surge. Somebody comes by in a Ford F-15 and says, "Hey, you want to ride? I'll get you out of there." The guy goes, "No, God will provide. I'll be fine." Time passes and now the water keeps rising. Now he moves to the second level and somebody comes by in a canoe, says, "Hey, do you want to ride? I'll get you out of there. I'll get you to safety." He goes, "No. God promised I will survive. He will save me." So time keeps going. Now it's a helicopter. He's at the roof of the house. "We'll get you out of there." They go, "No. God will provide. He will save me." So what happens? He drowns.
Yeah, because God has been providing 3 times.
Exactly. When he gets to the pearly gates, he says to the dude says to the guy, "What happened? You were supposed to provide." He said, "I provided 3 times. What else do you want from me?" It's the same thing.
I get that. No, I've never heard that before, but yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
So
it's
let's talk about what's next for Victoria Saccenti. You're working on something totally different. You're moving away from, I don't think you're moving away from destiny. I think you're actually sticking with destiny, but you're moving away from the normal dramatic romance, and you're going now into the genre of,
well, paranormal. But there's a quick aside on that, because I also have a work in progress that is totally contemporary. It's taking place in 2012. I have to check my notes but it's totally contemporary. And that one is also more in the dramatic twists and turns, character development, blah, 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 all that stuff. But I'm also working on a paranormal storyline that I started writing like, I don't know how many years ago. But this time, thanks to a friend of mine who said, "You need to write a short story. I need a short story from you. I must have a short story." And I said, okay, I'll give you a short story, for heaven's sake. I will. So I kind of looked at my material, all the stuff that I have on my file, and I said, wait a minute. I wanted to explore this supernatural, this paranormal story, not supernatural, paranormal, big difference.
Yeah.
This paranormal storyline. I said, well, why don't I make kind of like an intro short story for the paranormal and kind of introduce the world, the characters, how it all happens, and that's what I'm working on right now.
So
it's going to be ready soon.
This could end up being a series if it takes off.
I intend this to be a series.
Wow.
I intend this to be a series of stories. I call them the stories of, and I don't want to say any more because I don't want to give anything away. Not until the short story is
That's
finished.
quite exciting. So we've got a new novel that you're working on, which is going to be dark, maybe a little bit erotica, and then you're working on another short story at the moment, but could be a series, paranormal. I mean, this is like, what's making you write all these different genres? What's making you want to experience and go into these different realities now?
Why not? I've always liked paranormal. I've read paranormal from the beginning. I love fantasy. I love things that I like to read, that realm that is not your average daily event. I love, like I said, it's what I read since I was a kid, so why not this?
Why not?
And there's a taste for it, and whether it was a taste for it or not, I don't think it really matters, because what was it that said? I think it was Neil Gaiman who said, write what you like. Write what you like. Write your inspiration.
Some readers are going to enjoy
these guys,
but you're going to probably make new readers as well if you lose any because they don't like that genre.
I hope so.
You're going to have a new marketplace to market to new readers. So that's really exciting. I'm really excited for you.
I hope so. Actually, I'm having a lot of fun writing the story, the short story. I'm having a blast.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and chatting with us about your journey, about your wonderful books. And
thank you for having me.
It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for coming on Behind the Pen. And I wish you all the best in the future, Victoria.
Thank you. And the same to you, my dear.
Thank you.
Thank you.